In his book Forensic Architecture, Yale Weisman suggests the built environment is a form of media. They sense their environment and hold this information in their formal mutations. Elements of a built environment mutate in situations of stress. How would such adaptations affect the circulation, the space, and the elements themselves? This is adaptive reuse, but instead of studying slow, subtle changes, I chose to explore transformations that occur through extreme man made impact. The direct transformation of the environment, buildings, and infrastructure is a means of exercising control or offering resistance. Thus, typical architectural concepts such as circulation are sought to be recontextualized in an environment where every element can be hostile. Hostility and violence in the most extreme form in its built environment is observed during urban warfare, which was thus chosen as my topic. How would the spatial materialization of this abrupt change manifest? The author wanted to work with a relevant time period, choosing to focus on the ongoing Russia Ukraine war, specifically the Battle of Bakhmut and Mariupol. Due to the very nature of urban operations, the conflict was not one sided. The proliferation of sensors has penetrated the fog of war, making it the most transparent major conflict to have taken place and an easy choice to go forward with. The Donbass is a large industrial basin located partly in the eastern part of Ukraine with a significant ethnic Russian minority. Being a part of the western steppes, the Donbass is relatively flat. Bakhmut is one such industrial town. Mariupol, whereas, is an important city located along the southeastern coast of the region. In 2014, following the pro-EU protests in Ukraine, Russia annexed Crimea and a part of the Donbass. Both Bakhmut and Mariupol remained in Ukrainian control, but the conflict led to a deindustrialization of the region. Abandoned industrial plants were adapted into the series of trenches and defense fortifications. On February 24, 2022, Russian forces launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine to take control of its major cities, the seats of its administrative control. The objectives thus became clear. How do logistics and time influence the adaptations that an urban space undergoes to maintain or obtain control of it? How would a civilian urban space transform into a military one? But first, how would one define parameters such as the control of a built environment? Basically, it boils down to the control of the means of circulation through a space for logistics, command, and supply. In urban conflicts, the presence of man-made elements gives a three-dimensionality to the terrain. The first set of analyses was to understand the spatial considerations of urban warfare from both the side of the attacker and the defender. What are the characteristics of urbanized areas? A typical city consists of several of these zones. The urban battle space itself is divided into four basic levels. 1. The street level. Streets provide the means for rapid advance or withdrawal, for movement. 2. Buildings, which act as obstacles for the attacker or provide cover to the defender. It limits or increases the fields of observation and fire, and restricts or blocks the movement of forces. The subterranean level is used by both the attacker and the defender to maneuver, ambush, or infiltrate an enemy. The air. While aviation assets are not affected by obstacles on the street, their field of visibility is affected by obstructions such as buildings, power lines, etc. Here's a dummy's guide to modern urban battle. Good intelligence about the position and the capability of enemy is key. Surprise. Though this has become increasingly difficult with the current information saturated battlefield due to the presence of drones. Defenders must form into groups to avoid being targeted by drones. Be on the move. Don't be alone. One must stay hidden by using everything around them, such as sheets or boards between buildings. One can block the doorways and windows using debris, furniture, razor wire, etc. Use the underground to store supplies and rest. Combined arms places the enemy in a dilemma. Any action the enemy takes to avoid one combat arm makes him more vulnerable to the other. This three-dimensionality of the invading force counters the three-dimensionality of the urban terrain, enabling the achievement of quick control. Time. Generally, urban warfare is time-consuming. Time can allow the defender to reorganize, redeploy, or marshal resources. So, build multiple blockades, destroy all bridges, block open spaces and runways, and block all streets. Use RCC barriers readily found in urban areas, or rubble, or razor wires. Create anti-tank ditches and trenches, steel hedgehogs, and caltrops. Use these to create S obstacles on the streets, along with ambush points and kill zones. Isolation. No single factor is more important to the attacker's success than the isolation of the urban area, achieved by suppressing the unimpeded flow of manpower and supplies. Artillery can be used to cut off supply lines or destroy buildings used as strong points. Conquering the outskirts strip areas are necessary for targeting supply lines to the urban area and eventually encirclement. Therefore, form as many layers of barriers to slow down invaders and prevent this isolation. Some buildings can also be used as strong points after being well prepared for defense. Create mouse holes to move through buildings easily while avoiding enemy fire. Logistics is extremely important for both. As a parameter, logistics involves moving the military organization's requirements towards, within, and out of a battlefield, accommodating and storing facilities and services for people and weapon systems. Timely support, particularly in the area of ammunition resupply and evacuation, is a critical element of urban warfare. A flexible, balanced logistics system is imperative. The Russian armed forces began their invasion using a system where logistical supplies are calculated and pushed forward to the front according to predetermined usage rates. Combined with the mistake of working off of wrong assumptions, this reduced the speed of the operation, compounded by a top down command and control structure who weren't able to adapt quickly to the ground conditions at the start of the war. The Russian forces therefore failed to capture Kiev. The invasion was refocused on the protection of the people of the Donbass instead.
Ее цель – защита людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима.
The war therefore changed to static entrenchment from mobile combined arms warfare. Clearly, both these types of warfare depends massively on logistics and times, and manifest spatially in very different ways. In Mariupol, the city's proximity to Russia's logistics and troops stationed in Crimea led to the complete encirclement of the city, trapping a lot of civilians. The conflict descended to the typical form of open warfare studied through the Dummies Guide, that is, mobile combined arms warfare. Whereas in Bakhmut, logistical failures and shortages, combined with existing defenses such as trenches dug up by the Ukrainians, descended the conflict into a static positional kind, preventing the town's isolation from its supply lines and subsequent encirclement, and allowing a majority of the civilians to be evacuated easily and quickly. The architectural manifestations of the defenses in the case of Mariupol thus take the form of obstacles and kill zones, whereas in Bakhmut, it is trenches. The major factor for the defense in Mariupol depended on the relationships between multiple elements converted into obstacles to form ambush points, while in Bakhmut, it depended on the time, equipment, and the terrain in constructing trenches. The spatial manifestations of the conflict in each case, that is, positional versus combined arms warfare, showcases the different relations at different scales. The first is a regional scale, important for understanding the overall systems and the execution of the tactic of isolation. For Bakhmut, the regional scale is the most important, with major focus on the trench systems with the fortified towns and north. Control was established here as literal lines on the ground, position and time here playing important roles. A typical trench design along this front involved zigzag trenches, making it harder to clear out due to the increase in the number of blind spots and increase in the defender's field of fire. Nettings and brambles overhead obscure its contours to the attackers. If time permitted, wooden planks and sandbags were used to stabilize the trench. Concrete pillboxes and bunkers were at regular intervals for reconnaissance, snipers, and ammo storage. The trench was further defended by caltrops, razor wires, and dragon's teeth. The Russians responded with meat-wave attacks on the trenches, ultimately hoping to overrun and occupy them and therefore solidify their control over that stretch of the territory. For Mariupol, just a minor summary is required at this scale, however, to understand the complete encirclement and provide context before going into the manifestation of the civilian hiding spots and evacuations. The second is the scale of the three-block radius. This is the scale at which individual company movements and adaptations are planned, and is important for understanding the relations between different elements as part of a larger strategy like an ambush. The last scale is the largest, focusing on specific elements in an individual building and how they are transformed into obstacles. As mentioned earlier, Mariupol devolved into the typical image of urban warfare. The positioning and the orientation and the relationship between the different elements used to form the kill zones is studied within this three block radius and the building scale together, taking the example of either the Azovstal steel plant, Freedom Avenue, or the Yelish plant ambushes. In the Azovstal plant, we see the use of industrial buildings and the huge networks of tunnels underneath for cover from bombs and shelter for both civilians and weapons. The three block radius scale is not important with respect to Bakhmut, but the building scale becomes relevant again, with terrain, positioning, and orientation, fields of view, and fire needing to be considered. The case study chosen was the battle over the garbage dump. The dump is surrounded by fields providing good defense combined with an elevated field of vision. A trench was dug up along the road to prevent an ambush from the T line and prevent the Russian goal of capturing the intersection, who occupied the heights at the other end separated by an open field. We thus see that the nature of the position in urban contact gives significant advantage to the defenders, compounded by the sophistication of the fortifications used, tried to overcome by repeated infantry attacks by several small groups, some attempting to outflank. Methodology. Since plans or models of the spaces aren't available and traveling to an active war zone is not ideal, verifiable photographs, videos, social media posts, articles, and news reports of the particular case studies were compiled over the past 7 weeks. Apart from satellite imagery, two methods will be used to visually represent the required data: the image complex and the photogrammetry method, where images are geolocated and combined to create an architectural model of the elements and the space. What do I plan to do next? Use these documented images and methods to draw the architectural systems of defense and offense in its appropriate case study. Begin representing these in all the three scales to thus be able to draw relations between them and begin arriving at inferences.